for, some shows I would have like, entirely like full booth of textured pieces or duplicast pieces. And so this really got me into the idea of fabrication, of assembling pieces, of making components, and bringing those components together for a single design, and how you can connect those pieces, and how polish will be, or how the polish will affect the finished piece, things like that. Even down to polishing and how I polish.
Man, you got good lights and nice camera.
How are you doing?
You do good. Nice to see you. I have Jared Chavez on my show today. Love your stuff. I'm a fan. I even wore a bracelet. There we go.
Oh, nice.
Anybody who happens to be watching the YouTube video of this, you can take a look at it. I'll even put an image of it up on the YouTube so we can see. And so I've been a fan of you and your father for a long time. And so I'll tell you how I was thinking about why I wanted to have you on. First of all, I'm trying to do a lot for Native artists, get the Native voice out during Indian market timeframe, really from, all of August, September, October, because so many people are struggling. So many artists are struggling because they can't, they can't, find an audience. Now you and your dad are different. You're quite frankly, you're famous. You have a nice website, all that stuff. But still, I'm sure you would tell me, hey, Mark, yeah, I can use the sales, brother.
Well, it's a really just unsure time right now. And when everything was happening right after the herd, we went into the herd just thinking like, oh, this will all blow over and, not much to worry about. My sister was flying in from DC, and she was the main one that kept telling us, like, make sure you have your hand sanitizer, and I'm not shaking hands with anybody. And I just kept telling her, it's fine, it's gonna stay over there. It's where it is, it'll be fine. And we go through the herd, and it was like a normal show for us. Well, my dad didn't go out this year. He didn't have anything to show, and he was on some other projects, so he just stayed behind. And I took it on myself, just showed my work, and it was great. We saw all our old familiar faces, all our friends, and we had a great weekend. And it was almost immediately after we returned that everything hit the fan.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started to take things really seriously. And my first thought was, I need to finish all the orders that I have in place before, because we didn't know what was going to happen, stock markets, everything.
We still don't know, right? That's
exactly. Exactly. So, I just tried to get my, get everything in order and get everything in a row. And so I just finished up everything that I had to do in the studio, and just kind of hunkered down. And, you're just watching things happen, and you're just worrying more and more. And you're just thinking, oh, August is so far away. And hopefully by then something will have been figured out, and the days move farther and farther along, and you realize nothing's happening. Nothing's going to change right now.
No.
So,
and we're going to be in the same boat a year from now, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I didn't go to the herd this year specifically because I was afraid of COVID, quite honestly, because people come from all over, and I was like, could be really problematic. And things were getting shut down at that time. I had a show that I shut down not long after that. We were going to have it, and I was just like, no, it's too crazy. And here we are. For those people who might be watching it later, we're in the first week of August 2020, and wouldn't surprise me if next year we're trying to decide, do we have Indian market? I hope we do.
Exactly.
I'm not 100% sure if we will.
Well, that's the thing. You have these shows, and it's not so, yes, of course, it's all about, the business aspect of it. There's that. But for me, market has always been, it's been a part of my history since forever.
Right.
My dad's been in the business since 1976,
right.
and he's been in market just as long. And so he was from back in the day. You could go the day of Indian Market and sign up for a booth, pay your fee, and then set yourself up.
Right.
So it's been a part of my family's livelihood from the very beginning. And he never really held back from attending events with him, gallery openings, client dinners, that kind of thing. So it's been a big part of my own life as far as I can remember, even before I started making jewelry. And once I started making jewelry, of course, then I started learning the ins and outs of the business and met more clients, made friends, and just it's just a way of life.
Yeah,
And
Indian
so
market really is that social fabric, right? I mean, it's like getting together with all your cousins and all your friends and all the people that, you know, are important in your world, seeing new art, being creative, having fun, making money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. It really just kind of creates that, I don't want to use the word hype, but I mean, there's that excitement, not only for the people that are going to be able to see and visit the show, but for us, it was always just kind of this point in the year, which really just kind of signified a change in the season for us as well. My dad always has a saying, which he said that the air smelled different right after Indian Market. It smelled like fall.
He's right. It does.
And so, you know, it really, you know, you have your part of the market as far as the business goes, but then you also have that time that, you know, which marks this kind of this building of momentum until you finally have for us, that Saturday, that Sunday, and then like it's over. And then it's just like this wave of like, oh my God, I can't believe it's all done. So
you have all the orders that have hopefully come in and sales. And so you have the fall and the winter to try to catch up again, right?
Yeah. And, you know, for us being able to see our friends, you know, who come year after year in coming to the booth and just kind of creating this level of excitement, because they get to see each other too. You know, they're coming from all over the country. And so it's just like this big meetup. So that it creates this kind of atmosphere where you're at the booth, you're trying on things, you're looking at things, you're looking at other people trying on things. You're like, oh my God, what did you buy? What did you buy?
Right.
And you, it's just, they're also excited. And in turn, you're really excited about talking with them about the pieces that you made and the processes that you went through. And oftentimes explaining the hardships of what went into some of these pieces and some of the pieces that didn't make it, because oftentimes with the work that we create, it's really trial and error. We kind of have a idea in mind of what we're going to do, what we would like to create, but there's no real set direction. And so as you're making something, you can have an idea that, okay, well, it's going to fit this way, it's going to lay this way. But once you get to a point where you actually get close to a finished product, it may be something entirely different and it may not work out and you may have to totally scrap it. It's happened a lot.
Wow. So when you scrap one, because I've watched your videos, which are great, by the way, of how you make things, how you design things. And, you know, there's a lot of drawing, there's a lot of thought pattern that goes into it. There's a lot of modeling. You spend an amazing amount of effort to get some singular piece. You could get to the end of that piece, have made the piece and go, this doesn't work, and completely, remelt it, the whole thing.
Absolutely. And that was really an issue early on when I was doing a lot of vessels. Initially, my vessel work consisted of just cylindrical objects, which were narrative-based pieces. And so they told a story, but they were always personal stories for myself. I eventually moved on to a larger piece. The largest vessel that I ever made was one that went to, to commemorate the completion of the Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. So I used very organic shapes, freeform shapes in the actual shape of the vessel itself. And the actual exterior paneling was all stamped representations of each year that I had while I was at Georgetown. And the top was just kind of like this overseeing eye, just representing my overall looking back at what I had been through. And then in commemoration of the museum, you have that shape of all the time and years and passion that go into both graduation, the building of this building, and what that building meant. So that was the last piece that I did. The following year, I had another narrative piece, which was based on my outlook on more or less the changing of the world and how I was looking at things in terms of coming out of college and looking at the world in terms, I guess, in more of a business sense, and how that worldview changed a lot. And I was basing that around the Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel. So
it's before your time, brother.
Oh no, there's a lot of Simon and Garfunkel here. One of my dad's
that comes from your dad, huh?
Oh yeah, and it stays here right in my head.
You were doing that vessel around that song, "The Sounds of Silence" by Simon and Garfunkel, and then what happened with that?
Basically, it was a double-sided vessel, which on one side you had kind of a pastoral kind of Pueblo landscape. Actually, I have it. Yeah.
Again, for those people who are not watching this, we're in Jared's studio, and he's now digging around to pull out something to show. So it's always good to watch these if you can. So he's got,
for those that can't see it, this is basically it's a pastoral, entirely textured landscape, rolling hills, fields, clouds, sunrises, but then in the corner you have this encroaching almost cityscape, and within that it's more or less kind of impeding upon the actual landscape here, and on the reverse side would have been entirely encompassed by that cityscape.
That's also
and so the whole thing basically was my mindset at the time of just kind of switching gears from where I was as an undergrad to really thinking about being serious as far as the business goes. And so I had the narrative in place, the textured pieces in place, and that was all set. And then it came to actual fabrication, and these are large pieces of metal. They were two, I believe, 14 by, I would say, 12-inch pieces of 16 gauge, of course, in freeform shape. And I was going to solder them together with walls on the edges. And both my dad and I had to work on it using double torches, soldering along the edge seams. And as we were soldering, solder was going into the texture and the piece was warping. And this is probably, I'd say, about 2 weeks before Indian market. And it just got to that point where this is not going to happen, and it wasn't just about that soldering phase. It was about thinking about all the other steps down the line, which many things could happen, and you just didn't know what would set you back and how that would set you back in the rest of the collection that you're planning for the summer. And because this isn't the last piece that I have to finish, it's this and many other things.
Is that a devastating thing when that happens, or is that just part of, this is who I am, this is creativity, and some things just work out?
It definitely, that one definitely hit hard. It was one of those situations where I really just kind of had to sit back and just talk to myself and say, you know what, it's not worth it. It's not worth that extra stress it's going to put on you. And one thing my parents have always told me is that if a piece is meant to be, it's meant to be. And you can't force it into fruition, because if you do, it could go the entirely opposite direction, and it's not going to be a happy piece, basically. And so you want to make sure that these things happen organically. And so oftentimes it's just better to kind of put things aside, and maybe somewhere down the road in some way you can figure out how to use it. Or possibly scrap it. But for this piece, it was a very personal piece for myself. So I've kept the paneling for a while. And
when was that? What Indian market was
that was probably about 10 years ago. Yeah, I'd say
it's still there. It's a reminder. Yeah, I can see it's. You're not done with that piece, I don't think.
Right. And and sometimes we learn from those mistakes. Other times of course, you always want to try again. And the following year, I wanted to make a silver purse. And, it seemed much more feasible. And it was a smaller piece. Again, all textured. This one didn't have a narrative attached to it. It was all pure design. And with that, I had the entire piece soldered. And all I was doing was cutting off the excess of the sides of the purse. And I used a expandable drum sander to kind of smooth out the edges with a rough grit sandpaper. And again, this is coming down to probably 2 weeks before Indian market, as most of my big projects tended to do. And I am grinding away on this piece on the drum sander, and I just flipped it on at a certain angle, and it caught on the drum. And all I heard was a bang, and just completely shocked, didn't know what happened. And I looked down at my finger, and it just blood everywhere. And I was absolutely convinced at that moment that my entire finger had sheared off.
Oh, wow.
And all I could do was hold my hand and yell for my dad. And he comes out and he's panicking. My mom comes out, she's panicking because the studio's right outside my parents' house.
Right.
And they rushed me off to the hospital, and I hadn't seen what it looked like. I just had my hand wrapped up. Right. And we get to the hospital and they unwrap it. I'm like, is it there? Is it there? Oh my God, is it there? And they unwrapped it and it was there. It was very badly injured, but it was there. And so after that, I decided big projects before Indian market or something I really, really need to plan out a whole lot more.
Well, I think to really understand where you came from, we need to go back because your backstory is very interesting as well. So were you born or raised in San Felipe? I assume you were raised there, but were you born?
Oh yeah, I was born in Mexico, Santa Fe, and grew up in San Felipe, Pueblo. My parents' home was built by my grandfather, my dad's father, and it was originally just that structure around this area for the longest time. And when my dad started making jewelry, he was working in the house, and he is known to be very clean. And so even back then,
Boy, he is. Let me tell you, I remember going to his studio like 20 years ago. You may not even know this, but I found your dad because I thought he was fantastic. And I went to his studio to buy jewelry. First part was interesting because when I went in there, expecting to be able to buy some stuff, he's like, oh yeah, well, we can put you on the list and it'll take, 3 to 5 months or something. And, this is 20 something years ago. And I thought, oh, wow, this guy really is good. And then, but the studio was meticulous. I mean, it really looked like a lab almost. It was so clean. And I think that probably goes back to his history, which is interesting, right? I mean, he really studied architect, right? He was working with an architect in town, right? Was Harvey Hauser was who he worked with?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, who also had apprenticed with a very famous architect as well, right?
Mm-hmm. And they worked under the Mies van der Rohe School of Design.
Right.
And so again, that's what inspired. They gave him the whole philosophy of less is more. But I think the fastidiousness of his actual art creation process, like I was saying back in the day when he was making jewelry in the house, he had everything taped up and covered up just because they were making hishi at the time. And of course, it creates a lot of dust, and he didn't want dust all over the place. And that was one thing that was really getting to him, is he needed an extra space so that he didn't get the house dirty. So eventually that's when he built the studio here. And, of course, it's this is for, to keep things clean in the house, and does get dirty in here, but not as dirty as you would think.
Well, one of the things I notice about your videos too are that you wear masks, that you wear gloves, that you really take your own health seriously as well, not just the fastidiousness of it, but you realize that grinding rocks and silicon and things is really a dangerous profession, quite frankly.
Oh, absolutely. The gloves kind of came into play for my dad because he didn't like because oftentimes, you do polish with your bare hands. And what he really didn't like was how all the grime got into your fingernails. And so he eventually started wearing surgical gloves. And you do have to be very careful with that as well, but it does kind of eliminate that grit and those compounds getting into your hands. And of course, with the masks that we wear, with the sanding, the polishing, all the particulates that can get out in the air, it is pretty dangerous. So we try to make sure that we protect ourselves as much as possible, because he said one of his biggest worries was, he just never wanted us to be affected by any of the work at all down the road.
But you
that
can.
was always one of the biggest fears.
Yeah, you can easily get silicosis for sure in the lungs. And, he is known for his taking stone or coral, whatever it might be, from the beginning and really going the whole process from breaking it, chipping, everything, and doing every hand step himself, right? That's one of his signature parts of his art, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. And a lot of what he does is he has established himself with a number of materials in terms of finding the exact process which works for each of these materials and polishing them. Black jade, the jades have kind of become his signature stones over the years.
Right.
And with those, the polishing is actually quite difficult to get that nice mirror polish on them, because a lot of times when you do finish these in traditional methods using leather wheels, things like that, you get a matte surface. And he didn't like it. It wasn't what he wanted. It wasn't the final effect that he wanted for these pieces. So he spent a lot of time developing, researching, and looking for polishing techniques that would work with these materials. And they are what they are today. And he applies it to other stones to see how they work. So it's a lot of trial and error depending on the material. But a lot of it also depends on the material itself, because one black jade isn't another black jade. And so stuff from Australia isn't going to be like the material that he gets, that he uses in particular. So he'll do trial runs of polishing certain pieces. And if he sees something in the stone that he doesn't like, then he just won't use it.
He gives it to you.
Yeah, exactly. I get it.
Jared, this is one for you. You go work with this one, son.
And oftentimes, I can't see what you saw.
Well, and you must have grown up right along his knee. In fact, I don't remember seeing you there when I was there the one time, but you're quite a bit younger than I am. And though you have a kid, I see somebody.
I do. I have a 5-year-old.
Is that your mom's? Was that your dad that just went by?
Probably, yeah. He's in the background going back and forth over there.
Yeah, there he goes. If you hadn't watched the video, we saw him for a second. So you grew up at his knee, really, right? Watching this?
Well, up until the age of 10, I don't think I really paid a whole lot of attention. I always knew that he made jewelry, but I never really paid a whole lot of attention to the process behind it. Right. And it really took kind of being bored one summer and coming in and complaining, saying I have nothing to do. And, of course, that's not something you would say around my dad, because, there's always something to do. But that summer he said, well, if you're interested, I'll teach you how to make jewelry. But it wasn't something to be taken lightly. It was definitely something that he wanted to make sure that if I was going to learn, I would really put myself into it, because he didn't start me out with copper or brass or anything. He went straight to silver. He gave me these materials, and he basically told me, okay, this is how you saw, this is how you file. And, I'm not sure my mom knew if I was using torches back then, but this is how you solder. It was a lot of trust put into me for learning those processes. And I did take it seriously. And then initially, if you look back at a lot of those first pieces, he never told me what to make. So a lot of them are really varied in terms of design. It was really just about playing with the material and seeing what it could do. And, oftentimes he would come in and, say, well, here, try these. He gave me a set of 8 stamps. He said, try these out, see what you do. And he showed me how to stamp. And, I tried it out. And I started incorporating that. And he showed me how to start making lines in the pieces. But all my initial pieces were really just hand filed. And when he taught me how to make bezels, he would do the stones for me in some of those pieces. So there's a lot of uncredited Richard Chavez cabochons out there.
Yeah, did you have a signature? Were you signing your pieces yet at that point?
I would take a little scribe, a little metal scribe, and I would just write my name on them. And people will bring those back every now and then. And it is a little difficult to see the signature, but you can still make it out in some of those. But I would be able to pick them out if I saw them.
Does it say Jared Chavez, or what does it say?
Yeah, it just says, it would either say JJC or Jared Chavez on them.
I'm looking for these now.
Yeah, they're definitely out there. I was, and that was one of the things that it was one of the biggest advantages I had in terms of getting into the business. I was very, very, very fortunate in terms of he spent many years building his name and his career. And it wasn't for a matter of seeking any type of notoriety at all. It was just purely for taking care of his family. And but he also had his work ethic. He also had his standards for his designs. And all of that is what brought him his own recognition and the clientele that it brought. And so getting into the business was something that, he would take me along to market and say, well, this is Jared, he's starting, and these are the new pieces he has. And so from very early on, I had a very good experience getting into things like market and shows, and just being this little kid who was making jewelry at the time. And I was proud of what I did at that time too. And I was having a lot of fun with it.
How old would you have been at that point when you were starting to show at market?
I was 10. I was about 10.
Yeah, that's really young.
Yeah.
I should have bought some of those pieces.
And the thing about it at the time, again, because my dad is watching me make these pieces, and he wouldn't say much along the way. He would give little suggestions here and there, so something that might make things easier. And then I would take my pieces all the way to the point of being finished, and I'd be so happy. He's like, "Oh, they're so nice and shiny," and he would look at them and nod his head, and yeah, it's a really nice piece. And then come showtime, I would see these pieces, and they would be much, much shinier and less rough looking. What I didn't know was that he would take the pieces after I finished them, and then he would completely repolish them.
Yeah.
He would take out the scratches and the areas that didn't polish so well, and he would completely repolish.
That's what Dad does. That's the love, instead of finishing his own jewelry or working on some other piece to have it for market, he's cleaning up your marks on your jewelry.
Exactly. And here this whole time, I thought I was, I would get these pieces like, wow, they got better as they aged.
Oh, that's really fun. And did you win some awards in the kids group?
Initially, yeah, I did youth judging, and I got a few awards here and there. I remember one of them was I got from I think it was Harry Fonseca was a judge one year, and I was really happy about that. And so it was always really exciting. Again, that's when it was really fun. I didn't really have to think about. It was just like, this is something I do for the summer, and I don't even know if I really had a set schedule or anything. It was just I would come in to the studio whenever, and I would work here and there. But I always had my own workspace. It's actually still the area that I work in today, right behind me, not the same bench or anything. But I always had a work table and my own tools and all that. And so he would, just kind of let me go and work as I would. And, again, for the longest time, I was in very, very fortunate position where, he even bought my materials.
Oh, yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, when he buys the silver and helps you polish a few stones, that makes a big difference. And
yeah,
when you make your jewelry, I was just looking at your hallmark. I'll just put it up here. Tell me about that hallmark. I'm just curious where that comes
it's two J's back to back, and then the stylized C on top.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting. I wondered what that was exactly. I didn't know. And you've had that for how long?
Oh geez, probably since the 7th grade, maybe. I'm not sure how old I would have been then, but yeah, I'm probably 12, 13.
How did you come up with that?
I guess I always had a fascination with the logo because I love my dad's logo so much, and he put a lot of work into that himself, and it's evolved over the years because I think a lot of some of his early pieces that he did were marked as Richard Chavez, and the logo came over time, and I was obsessed with the idea of figuring out how to make a logo for myself. So I would play around with designs here and there and see how the two J's and the C could go together. And the initial ones that I came out with, like just kind of playing around in a notebook, looked like fish hooks, and I wasn't really a fan of them. And eventually they turned into something a bit more stylized to what you see today. And but now I actually just kind of hand engrave small hallmarks in a lot of the pieces now. So I don't really stamp them in there because I found that by stamping them in there after I've stamped an entire piece, sometimes it'll mar the stamp work on the other side. So I found that just kind of having a little engraved hallmark doesn't take away from what's on the surface.
Well, and you also, I notice a lot of your pieces have titles, which I really like, and that's different and unique. What's that about?
A lot of times with my work, it's not really fully representative of anything. A lot of it's pure design and how I draw. I call it everything. It's basically a stream of conscious design process. As I'm thinking about what it is that I want to make, but sort of say I want to make a bracelet, then I'll just kind of start sketching. And I say everything starts with a curved line. And so you start with a curved line and you start building and building and building until you have a design which works for you. And then from that, you extrapolate that and take it to the metal. But having the actual, like the lines of a design. So in the bracelet that you have, if you look at like the dark lines that you have in there, those are what come first in terms of the actual stamp work. I'll lay all those out by drawing on the surface of the silver in Sharpie. And then I'll take steel music wire, bend it into shape, and then hammer it into the design. And then that'll give me the actual line work of the piece. And from there, then I'll determine the different types of texturing tools. So I'll use hammers, stamps, stippling tools, and kind of fill in areas also accommodating for light and dark, because my early pieces actually did have a lot of fully stamped surfaces, and you really lost the design. So over time, I found that you need to balance that out in terms to really have the full effect of the piece and really see what it is that you're creating. And so oftentimes what I'll do is after I finish a piece, I'll look at it and kind of see what I see within that. And if you look, I think there's a piece on the website. I really didn't think about it until after I made it. Turned out to be like a little landscape, and there's a little triangle kind of in the upper portion of the bracelet. And I was like, oh, it looks like a little UFO. I'm like, well, that's actually perfect for New Mexico. So it's UFO on the horizon, and that's just something that kind of pops up. But with this type of design, what's happened is collectors have actually they've actually really enjoyed it because they actually find their own meanings. They find their own interpretations within the piece. So it becomes that more strong of a bond for the person that's looking at the bracelet, as opposed to me saying, this is what it means. Unless, like I said, unless it's a fully narrative design that I had in mind, and I've done those pieces and bracelets before as well, other types of pieces as well. Unless it's something I have in mind previously, then I'll just kind of go as I design it and, go in terms like that.
So you grew up in San Felipe and you're working with your dad when you're a young kid. What were you like in high school? I mean, were you introverted? I'm the son of a famous silversmith, or were you doing sports?
I wasn't really into sports. I was really into arts, and I was a good student, I guess. I had a good group of friends who, I guess we were, I guess, quote unquote, smart kids. And I didn't see myself that way, but I guess that's how some people saw us. And I took advantage of like clubs here and there, mainly ones that where you could travel, things like that. And I got to know a lot of the teachers really well, and in that they really wanted to make sure that I knew of opportunities that were available for different things like travel. Like our school librarian, she set up an exchange with the school in New York that myself and a few of my classmates got to participate in, and so we got to go to New York, got to go to Broadway, and see things like that, and then in turn,
through San Felipe. Was that the San Felipe school system?
No, this was the Indian school. Sorry.
Oh yeah, this is Indian school, and that's in Santa Fe. That was
Santa Fe, right? Mm-hmm. And this is the old Indian school, nothing like what you see now.
Yeah, right. No, totally different. And so they set that up. So your first experience of the big city. How old were you when you went to New York? Do you know?
I think that was probably ninth grade. I was in ninth grade.
Yeah, that's monumental from a kid from. I mean, I'm a kid from New Mexico, and going to New York City. Yeah, that has to be inspiring to see it.
It was a neat experience. It was a neat experience because they set us up with families while we were out there. We actually stayed with the families, and then you went to classes with the students there, and got to see their school and how things work. And then also you went out with your the guides and your classmates, and you saw, of course, the city and everything. And I took part in another trip to Washington, and that was probably eighth grade. And that was probably, and then 10th grade was probably, I did a European trip. It was in Germany, Italy, and France. And but these were all clubs, really, you signed up for. And, I was very fortunate that my parents encouraged that. They really wanted me to, if it was something that I really wanted to do, they encouraged me to go out and do that. But I did a lot of things like that, and of course, kept up with my schoolwork. I tried to be a good student.
Right. I see that. Me too. I get it.
And then, senior year, by senior year, I finished up a lot of my requirements. So I actually, they had a program at the Indian school at the time. It was called School to Work. And you could basically, I guess, learn a trade or something like that. Learn from either someone in the school, or they would set you up with somebody elsewhere, and you would actually get paid for it.
Right.
So junior year, I was always very into computers, things like that, and I got set up with the school administrator, the systems administrator. His name is Arthur Eberl, and he taught me the ins and outs of maintaining the school's computer network, how to back things up, and like how to do some like basic programming. And got me. This was also the time the Indian school had a big grant from Intel, and so they had the big Intel lab there, and they had a program where students could build computers. And at one point, he asked me to video the progress of take video of the students building these computers. And so I went in and took all that video, and then he showed me how to edit, like very early on before iMovie, Premiere, or anything. This is, I was playing around, learn how to edit video, and I ended up making these little mini documentaries, which Intel would use to solicit more, to basically show other schools, like, this is what the Indian school is doing, and this is what we can also do for your school, kind of thing. And so that grew into almost a full-time job senior year, because I had finished up all my requirements. So a big portion of my block could be taken working for the system administrator at Intel. So I was kind of going back and forth between the Indian school and a project Intel had me set up with, taking a video footage of another computer lab they were setting up at the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Fe. Mm-hmm. And so that really got me into video and editing. So that really piqued my interest, and that kind of held through all the way through college. college.
Did you think at that time maybe that could be your path? Maybe it wasn't creating, jewelry like your dad, and you're going to have to follow your dad's footsteps, and they're very big footsteps, and you're doing something very creative and cutting edge. I mean, that had to be, do I do this or do I not?
I did. And, again, I really enjoyed it. And I was, I definitely was having a lot of fun with it. And I did pursue a studio arts degree with emphasis in digital arts and printmaking while I was at Georgetown.
So, yeah, you went to Georgetown.
Right.
And that had to be a big change too, right? I mean, you're from San Felipe to go to Georgetown?
Well, that was
I can see in your face, maybe it wasn't that big of a change.
Well, it was a funny way how all that happened. My sister she had moved out there, and she was a curator as they were building the museum. She was preparing one of the new exhibitions that they were going to open when the museum first opened. And so I got to go out and visit her a lot when she was living there. And one night we were having dinner in Georgetown on M Street. And this was, of course, a long time I'm thinking about colleges and everything. And so it was raining that night, and we finished up dinner, and then we were just taking a drive around the neighborhood. And we drove right in front of Georgetown gates, saw Healy Hall, and I'm like, what's that? And my sister said, oh, that's Georgetown. That's the university here. I'm like, well, that's cool. And then we went around the corner a little bit farther down, and then it's like, are those the Exorcist steps? Oh my God, that's pretty cool. Like, oh my God, this is that Georgetown. Whoa, I think I'm going to apply here. So I was like, okay, well, I'll throw my hat in the ring for the application here. And, I applied to several other universities as well, and UNM and Fort Lewis. And I got declination letters from several. I won't name which, but I got an acceptance. After those declination letters, I was a little disheartened and didn't really know what to think of that. And so I got an acceptance from Fort Lewis. And I was so excited, like, oh my God, Fort Lewis. My parents went to Fort Lewis, and I love Fort Lewis. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is great,
campus,
actually.
And they had a great program, and I was looking forward to it. And so I accepted. I was really happy. I got my roommate assignment, and we had talked, like, this is what you're bringing, this is what I'm bringing, all that. And probably a couple days later, having that conversation with my future roommate, I got an acceptance letter from Georgetown, and I was like, ooh, man. And I was like, you know what? I really want to go to DC. And again, this is the brashness of youth, because it wasn't one of those decisions that I should ask mom and dad. I really just wanted to go to Georgetown. And, I'm sure conversations were had about that. I don't really recall, but
they were had, they were had.
Yeah, exactly. And, my dad worked really hard to make sure, my parents worked really hard to make sure that I went, and I was happy and set up, and it was an amazing experience. I also had my sister out there. So if I ever got homesick or anything, she was, just across the Key Bridge in Arlington. And it was a little rough going freshman year. I would say I was definitely more introverted then. I didn't even really get to know a lot of people on my floor. Mm-hmm. And so by the time the end of freshman year, I wasn't 100% certain that I was actually going to stay. Or I was looking at art schools, and I was like, maybe art school is a better fit. And I just so happened to be going down the hall, getting on the elevator, leave my room one day, and a guy down the hall comes up to me. He's like, and we all knew each other, but I wasn't really, I didn't really hang out with a lot of people. And he asked me, like, well, hey, Jared, so a guy that was supposed to be rooming with us decided to live off campus, so we have an extra spot. Do you think you would want to be roommate? yeah, sure. And, but so I kind of went with it. And eventually, we had lunch and, these guys were great. And eventually, all the, a good majority of the people that were on my floor ended up being some of my best friends throughout my entire time at Georgetown. And, we came from all walks of life, people just from locally in Maryland, some from Sweden, New York, all over the place. And so we all just really kind of meshed together, and they really made my years there amazing. So I was really thankful to have met them all, because had I not, I think I did sign up for a single room sophomore year. Before that, we made these arrangements to be roommates.
I find it amazing how that's life, right? One little thing, just a little thing, that chance meeting and the opening up, it was enough to click you to go, okay, I have a culture here. I have a home here. Maybe I'll stick it out, because otherwise you go back, maybe you go to art school, maybe you don't, maybe you just start working in your jewelry right there. Who knows? I mean, it formed who you were, just that one little thing. And I'm sure it affects you today. I'm sure the things you learned at Georgetown, which is a wonderful university, stick with the way you make your art today, I would assume.
Absolutely. It wasn't an art heavy school. It did have an arts program, but the arts program encompassed one floor of one building. And while I was there, I did take pretty much all the classes that they offered. But there was a definite focus on, with the requirements they had as far as theology, being Jesuit school and all.
Right.
And so you had to take several courses in theology, and then of course all your prerequisites for your English, your math, and science classes. And they offered an amazing variety of electives and things like that. But it was really just being in the area that they took advantage of. Being in the arts program, of course, you had access to all the museums on the mall,
Right.
for different research projects, and for being able to go to the Library of Congress for research papers. It's just a crazy experience, to have all of these resources at you. And it was just really, really, everything was a great benefit. But like I said, the friends that I made there were, they really made it, because it just kind of really opened my eyes to, just where people come from and how different you can be. Because going to elementary school, I went to the Pueblo Elementary School here in San Felipe, and then of course I went to the Indian school. So my entire from kindergarten to senior year, it was all Pueblo, and then different bands of Native American in high school. And so to meet people from all over, and to realize that we're all just kind of on the same wavelength, and then bond over what we bond over, it was great.
And so you were doing a lot of printmaking, right, in Georgetown? Was that one of the things you were focused on?
Yeah, it was probably my I want to say towards the end of my sophomore year that I took an intro to printmaking class, and we started on basic aluminum plate lithography. So just transferring the images over onto aluminum plates, then exposing them to light, and then just learning that process. And eventually, the professor, Professor Custon, he saw that I was really into it, and of course, he knew my background with jewelry and everything. And he was the one that suggested that it was a woodcut prints that might work more towards my idea of the types of designs that I was creating. And I wasn't so sure, because I was very much into intaglio etching and the drawing quality that you could achieve with that type of printmaking. And then where you would draw on top of plate covered in wax compound, and then you would etch that and eventually run that print. So I wasn't really considering woodblock printing until eventually I tried it and realized both in the type of printmaking that I could do, and but what really got me was the scale that I could work in. I started working much larger.
Mm.
And actually, I created several large pieces as part of my senior project, which were the basis of that vessel that I was telling you about earlier for the Smithsonian. Each of these represented a year that I had at Georgetown. And those were, I believe, 2 by 6 foot carvings
Oh, wow.
that I
Yeah,
did.
those are big.
And I
Where are
was
those
doing,
now? Where are
they're in storage. They're in storage. They're my parents.
they?
And those were actually going to use a process of instead of actually inking the entire surface of the board, what I did was I watercolored the surface of each of these boards and used very, very heavy watercolor. And there was going to be a process where when you ran it through the press with wet paper, that the watercolor would transfer onto the actual paper, creating a kind of more of a painterly quality of the actual print.
Like a monoprint, really.
Right. And but much like Market, time ran out, and I never got to it. But the prints themselves, the boards themselves, with the painted surfaces, they looked good, and so that became my senior project.
Have you ever considered doing that with your jewelry? I mean, it seems like a natural that you would not only do the jewelry, but add this other component of the art background that you have with wood blocks and things. I could see that being extremely successful.
Yeah, I did try that at one point. I after moving back to New Mexico after college, and after I finished up at Revere, I took some, or actually, I just audited some printmaking classes at IAIA just so that I could use the facilities. And I did try running some textured pieces through the printing press. And it was a process that I didn't get too far on, but it was an interesting aspect. And so that's something I definitely like to explore farther down the way, because I mean, they do offer the same type of effects that a woodblock print or an etching print would as well, where you could either roll the surface of a flat piece and then run it through the press, and you would achieve the same effect. So that's something always to look into.
Yeah, and I think just from an aspect of a business aspect, that making individual pieces is very time consuming. I'm sure you can't produce a lot of pieces in a year, but if you have something that you can supplement that with, which are these wood blocks of however, maybe just your design elements, which are multiples, it seems like that's a natural way to have another component. And I think when you do those things as an artist, I'm not an artist, but I work with a lot of artists. And I think when you do those things, it allows you things can happen that you could never imagine. You go, oh, this is really successful and I'm having fun, and it's an added component. I mean, it'll be interesting. I could see that doing very well. And it puts your artwork might allow you to go into other venues that you hadn't thought of your artwork being in, as far as galleries.
Oh, definitely. And it was always something that I had wanted to pursue further. There were several years where at both Indian Market and the Herd, where I did take a series of prints and display those as well. And they did okay. But again, I was thinking an entirely different scale aspect, because I think for me at the time, it was, she worked so small with jewelry most of the time. And with the printmaking, I wanted to go big. And so I did go very big with a lot of these prints. So I'm not sure how practical they were for a lot of them. So at the time, I think it was a lot of just kind of flights of fancy in terms of what I was making. It was what I wanted to make and what I thought looked, what I thought looked great, and about playing with the processes. And I guess that was the other thing, was to be a printmaker. It's great to have access to facilities to go, like for the classes and everything, but you have to be really prepared, to know this is what I'm going to do for the day, because if you're going to do that, then you're basically paying for the time that you're there. And so you should have everything in place to, where you're going to be running that through the press that day. And I was never that prepared. I was always kind of developing an idea as I was in the studio. So I was literally working on the boards or working on the plates as I was there. So my actual printing time wasn't all that much. And so what I would end up coming out with in the end was a very small amount of work. So I wasn't really doing full editions. Eventually, I did have a set of boards and plates that I worked with a printer in Albuquerque, and they ran editions. And I did show some of those for a while, and those were more narrative pieces. They were less design focused, pure design focus. So they were just kind of like, in my mind, a lot of these pieces were just like snippets of movies. You can imagine a small narrative that you have, and then you take like maybe 4 stills or 1 still or whatever, and you would have that single frame image. That's what I was doing in these pieces. So without knowing what happened before, what happened after, this is what happened in that moment. So that was the kind of work that I was doing, and I was a lot of them were very post-apocalyptic. I'm a big horror fan, so
that's cool.
The narrative was kind of constantly going in my head for some of these.
Have you done any of those in your jewelry with the horror aspect?
Not with the horror aspect. I think,
have you been tempted to do that though? Have you been tempted?
Sorry?
Have you been tempted to do it?
Here and there. I think, I can't say that I have done that, but yeah, it's always a possibility here and there, playing around maybe around Halloween. I did make vampire fang earrings,
there you
just
go.
For the heck of it, but that was as close as I got.
Well, when you left Georgetown, then you actually went to San Francisco, right? And went to another school. Tell me about that.
Right, and yeah, that came about as for my dad. Before I started college, both my parents, their view was that yes, I can do whatever it was I'd like as a career, and if jewelry was my choice, then great. But you need to have a backup, first of all, and that means getting a degree. Right. So they knew of my interest in video and everything, so they're like, go to university, go to at least get a degree so you can have that set. And if you need it down the road, if jewelry isn't the path at some point, then at least you have that. And so that's where Georgetown came into play. But while I was there, then I realized more and more that because all this time while I'm there during the summers, I'm still making jewelry and I'm still establishing these relationships with clients and galleries. I realized more and more that this was the path that I wanted. And so my dad told me, well, okay, that's if that's what you want to do, I'll support you. But if you want to pursue it, I would like, I've taught you what I know, but I would like you to have more formalized training in all aspects of jewelry making. And he had known about the Revere Academy of Jewelry Arts for quite some time. He had bought the book by Alan Revere, The Art of Goldsmithing. And in that book, they take you through different projects and, how to fabricate certain things, how to make chains, how to make bezels, all aspects of jewelry making. So he said, I think that's where you need to go. So I said, okay. And so I graduated in May of 2006. And in January of 2007, that's where I started, I graduated in May of 2005. And in January of 2006, that's when I started at Revere. And they had several different programs you could do. There was a longer course, which I believe was several months, which would take you from beginning to end as far as jewelry fabrication goes. But there was a more intensive one, which my dad thought would be better for me, which ran from January until March. And it was the same exact program, except it was every single day, 8 hours plus a day. And they took you all the way back to, this is how you solder, this is how you file, this is how you cut metal. And you're working with brass, you're working with copper, things like that. And, it was really, it retaught me how to make jewelry, really. Because, of course, I'm going in saying, I know how to do this, but it definitely reformed the way that I actually I made jewelry itself, because I worked on a just kind of a flat surface table, and I would hold metal using a vise, and then I would cut up, and from the top to the bottom. And when I was there, we had to start work using traditional jeweler's benches, where everything is kind of at shoulder level, and you're cutting right in front of you, or you're soldering right. Everything is right here. And it took me a while to get used to that, especially the cutting metal part. But once I started working that way, there was really no other way that I could work again. And it really just refined a lot of the skills that I thought were that I thought were good at the time. But they really kind of taught you to kind of look at the smaller facets of what you're making, and really just to kind of make sure you perfect those details, because a piece of jewelry should look beautiful both front, back, inside, and out. And so that was really beneficial, because it really refined the way that I make jewelry today.
And so you use that same skill set that you developed there in how you make your jewelry, and how maybe even you look at it a bit.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting.
Because I would say that it actually made my work a bit more delicate. Because initially I was really focused on the stamping and the tufa casting processes. And so for a lot of those pieces, they, of course, the stamping using heavy, I always use heavier metals, 12 gauge and above, just to really kind of accept the stamping a lot more. And so for, some shows, I would have entirely full booth of textured pieces or tufa cast pieces. And so this really got me into the idea of fabrication, of assembling pieces, of making components, and bringing those components together for a single design, and how you can connect those pieces, and how polish will be, or how the polish will affect the finished piece, things like that. Even down to polishing and how I polish. There are a lot of different methods that they taught there, which I guess really brought out a different look into the pieces, and made me think about how having light in a piece really affects the overall design, because without that, you really kind of lose the effect that you're trying to create.
What did your dad think when you came home and you were doing new techniques? You were working differently. I mean, completely differently from chest versus below. Was he like, "Oh, show me this," or was he like,
He was really happy. He was really happy. He was really excited about the techniques that I learned, because he had seen all of these in the book that he purchased, the goldsmithing book from Alan Revere. And he was really excited to kind of see a lot of these techniques in play. And a lot of it really kind of came down to, I would say, just kind of like bench techniques, like using charcoal blocks as opposed to using the asbestos-free blocks, because one reflects heat back more than the other, or using anti-fire scale coating on silver, so that when you're soldering a piece that requires a lot of heat, it's not just completely covered in fire scale, and you have to spend however long polishing all that out. This just eliminated those things. So there were little things you would see me do along the way that he was a big fan of, and he started incorporating into his own practice.
That was my question. So he did incorporate some of those things.
Yeah, definitely. And he was thinking about, because I got the same type of jeweler's bench that they were using at Revere for myself, and he was thinking about doing the same for his workbench, and he tried a couple times to work on mine. He's like, "No, it's not for me. I'm too used to the way that I work."
It doesn't surprise me, though, he would incorporate some things, because he's cutting edge, right? I mean, for what he was doing, I've always felt your father's work, and yours, clearly yours, has a different sensibility to it, that it's architectural. The designs are unique and different, and he just thinks on a different plane, which clearly has also affected your work. And I see similarities in your work, but they're very different to me as how I think of what he does and you do. And maybe you could even expound on that a little bit, how you see it, his work versus your work.
Well, that's the interesting thing about what happened in our studio. Was that, again, he got me started the way he did, in just giving me the tools and the initial instruction how to make jewelry, but never told me what to make. And so I just kind of had to take it in my own direction. And you will see early pieces that I made, which do bear kind of a striking resemblance to his in terms of the stone usage and the types of stone placement that I use. And, again, that was just in looking at what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just never something that I followed up on. It was the texturing and that really kind of got me, and like what I could do with that, and how I eventually started being able to use the piano wire, not to just make large shapes using one single piece of wire, but cutting hundreds of tiny pieces to create these multifaceted designs. And it was just one of those things where I'm not quite sure how it happened, but I just generally went in my own direction, and I would incorporate the lapidary here and there. And to this day, I'm still learning how to perfect some of the techniques that he has with his lapidary work. But to do anything as complex as he does in terms of inlay, I've yet to take that on. I definitely need to, because a lot of the processes that he has are timeless. And I think it's just I'm just thankful that it worked out the way that it did, because I think it'd be hard to be working in a studio where you're competing with one another, and you have two similar lines of work, probably at different price points.
Right.
Or you have clients who see, well, I have a piece like that of your dad, so that's why exactly.
Right.
And so there were all those ways that I could have worked out, but the way that it did work out was great. But in experimenting with designs after Revere, I eventually came about a new style that I have by happenstance. I call it linear inlay. I was making a bezel, and I had a few strips of silver just kind of like set aside, and they happened to be inside the bezel. And I was like, oh, that would be kind of cool if they were like soldered in place, and kind of create designs that way. And so eventually I took that idea, and I came up with a frame. I'll just say a circle, for example. And I drew a design within that circle, and then I started cutting strips of silver and bending them and forming them into shapes within that circle, and then soldering them into place. And it developed this whole other visual that was like, wow, okay, so this still speaks to the type of line work that I do in my stamping, but it's an entirely different look. And over time, I would evolve the style, and my dad would, saw what I was doing. And, again, this is how, in working in the studio, this is just one of the things that I'm so fortunate to have, is him right there, and he can see what I'm doing. And if it's something that he thinks, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? This might be easier. Or like, why don't you try this? This will help you like in this way. And so he helped me refine that technique in itself. And so when he saw me work on that, he eventually said, okay, well, I think our designs are starting to kind of come together. And it was actually Marty Strever who, we've worked with Marty for, it was Marty from the very beginning.
In 1976, I think she started showing
Yeah.
his work, right? Indian market.
Yeah.
Tracked him down. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. She found him. She was looking for him, and she had all of her sons out looking for him. And eventually they tracked him down, and they knew each other from that very, very time. And so we worked with Marty for forever, and she always had something in mind for her opening. She would always have us at her shows, and she would always want something for the opening before Indian Market. And so we would usually do our individual pieces. She would commission my dad for certain things, and she commissioned me for certain things, and those would all be available opening night. And it was at that time, that's when my dad was really happy with the type of work that I was doing. And he said, well, why don't we do a collaborative piece? We'll do a necklace. And he's known for doing these butterfly pendants.
Yeah.
And he was doing them in Sublette at the time. And was like, well, I think if you used your line work and my lapidary in my inlay in here somehow, if you could figure out how to work that, then I think this would be a spectacular piece. And so we both sketched out our ideas, and eventually I designed the neck piece and incorporated small areas where he could inlay black jade along the edges, and he did a removable pendant, butterfly pendant at the center. And it was a spectacular piece. And when we saw that, it was just like, wow, okay, this really works. And so from that point, then we really started collaborating using that particular technique. And many pieces. We've done a number of necklaces, and eventually the last collaborative piece that we did for Marty was a concho belt, a 10-link concho belt, which incorporated half line work and then half lapidary inlay in black jade, and that was a feat. That was a many. I think that was probably from April until right before Indian market. But it was always interesting how those projects came about, because we would always go to Marty's home and just to drop off things or visit, and it was always her and Stuart, and well, Jared, what are you going to make for me this summer? Jared, what are you going to make? And so we would have to come up with something, and of course it wasn't just going to be anything. We always had to make it special. We wanted to make sure that it was something for her. So and of course with any work that we put in, we're going to put all of ourselves into it. So it was always something cool. But these collaborations are really special. So we have a number of those out there right now.
Are you still doing any of those type things?
The linear inlay, we kind of paused for a bit. We did we did a pretty major necklace for Jean Waddell for, I think it was maybe 5 years ago. And that was using coral that would belong to Lolima. It was this massive branch. I don't remember how many pounds it was. And initially my dad started out using that for bracelets. We made several bracelets in the series, and Jean and Mike Waddell, they wanted to try a necklace, and so they had seen these necklaces that we had done previously, and they asked if we could do something along those lines. And so that one took quite some time to design. So the video you can find online on Vimeo shows that whole process of.
I watched. It was fascinating. Yeah. Actually, it was a really interesting video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, starting from just the basic sketches, and for those, my dad will again, being that with the architecture background, he'll bring out his full drafting table, and lay the whole design out as from like the sketches. And what he's actually taken to do is he'll go through my sketchbooks, because I have just stacks and stacks of sketchbooks from over the years of just different designs, and he'll kind of just flip through them. And sometimes the shape will interest him, like take like an earring, for example, and he'll take that shape and he'll like apply it to the necklace design and repeat it. And that's really kind of how we came up with a lot of the pieces, and just kind of tweak it here and there. Of course, we both have our input on what we think should go here, what we think should not go there, that kind of thing. But it's always truly a collaborative piece. We definitely have a 50-50 input on all those designs.
And so do you price it more or less?
Well, that's always the scary part. So
yeah, I would think it is, right?
In terms of for us, because like
right.
we don't, for us, pricing is always a difficult thing, because we don't want to get too far beyond I don't know how to explain it, too big for our britches. I guess that's the best way to explain it, because I think for some pieces, yeah, you know, you want to be able to have, you want it to be of value, and you want it to have that value of all the time and effort and
Right.
the blood, tears, sweat that go into these pieces. But at the same time, you don't want it to be unreasonable. And I think that's the thing sometimes is, you know, yeah, you know what your time is worth, but at the same time, you have, you know, for us, we kind of have to take that step back and say, okay, well, you know, that may be a bit too far, and, you know, try to find somewhere in the middle with some of these things. And, you know, that's,
I was going to say, do you think any of that's cultural, coming from the Pueblo? I mean, you know, I hear a lot of, you know, I've read in the history of, you know, native arts in New Mexico, and, you know, individuality for a lot of times was considered to be, no, that's not a good thing. It really should be about the people and the culture. And I just wonder if, you know, if any of that's there, that you stand out so above everyone else that could be culturally seen as an issue.
well, I wouldn't know about so much culturally for us. I think, you know, for my dad, like I said, and this all really started out as a means to be able to support his family.
Right.
And so, you know, I'm not sure if when it comes down to price, you know, if you say, so, you know, you make a necklace or what have you, and you say, oh, wow, that's really expensive. They must be like really famous.
Right.
You know, it was never about that. It's really just like, you know, well, you know, as long as, you know, we feel comfortable with where that price is, you know, then we're happy. And, you know, and that, you know, even that, like that process in and of itself is a lot of discussion between he and I, you know, for collaborative pieces. And, you know, a lot of times for pieces for himself, we don't, you know, he can be very, uh, we don't want him to undersell himself either, because, you know, we know like the time that it takes, and he doesn't put out much work nowadays, and that's just for the time that it takes for a lot of these pieces now, because he's, I think, as years have gone by, he becomes more critical of his work, and he wants to make sure that it still adheres to those standards. And so a lot of times he is definitely very more exacting with those details. And so we just want to make sure that he's fair with himself as well.
Right. Yeah, I could see that being an issue, how you do it. And you want to support your families, right?
Exactly.
You want things to sell too. You know, I think it's for all artists, pricing is always a concern. And, you know, for a lot of artists that, at least the fine flat art paintings, you know, they often will talk to me because I have a sense of what's selling, and, you know, if they want to make a big price jump or not, maybe even the opposite. Do you use that do you talk to any of the gallerists that you guys deal with as far as pricing, or is it strictly you make the decisions?
We generally make all the decisions, but what happened a few years back, my wife went back to school. She was a nurse at UNM, and she decided to go back for her to become a NP. And so in looking at her schedule, she realized that she was not going to be able to stay at work because of the requirements of school. And so we decided that it would be best if she left her job, and I could handle supporting the family. And so in doing that, I really had to look at both my processes and the type of inventory that I was creating at the time. Because yes, I did spend a lot of time on larger pieces, or pieces that were more elaborate. And, you know, of course, you know, they were more expensive, and, you know, that would my inventory for Indian market. And I look back at that now, and I kind of laugh, because I would have maybe 10 pieces.
Right.
And I was like, wow, how did I do that? Like, how was I so okay with just having 10 pieces? And so probably the Indian market, after we made this decision, I started working at changing my processes, not changing the quality, but seeing in what ways that I could tweak my processes or my design, so that I could create a wider array of pieces at various price points, so that nothing was like always at that top tier level. You had different gradations. And so in doing that, it was a lot more work. And I was, in the studio a whole lot more,
Mhm.
just because I had to have those. I mean, thankfully, I had, a good number of ideas and kind of creating this new line of pieces. And so, but it really just kind of made me look again at the pieces, at the price points, and just to make sure that all aspects of that were covered, because I couldn't afford to say, okay, well, I'm just going to depend on having this really high end line, and that high end line will
Right.
carry us through, because you have to be realistic about this sometimes, because I was trying out different shows. I was doing the Autry in Los Angeles, and then I was doing the NMAI show in New York. Um, and later on, I would try One of a Kind in Chicago, and that was a major disaster. And because you plan for these shows, and what you're thinking of, and the inventory you're going to have, and sometimes the prices you think that are going to work for some things don't, and so you have to reevaluate those down the road. And it was really a matter of kind of uh, trial and error with a lot of that. And and so, but I'm not making as many pieces as I was during that period where she was working towards her NP degree, but I'm still making more than I was when I would just have those 10 pieces. But the thing about that, again, it it's challenging, and it makes it more fun, because the couple of things I love doing, all aspects of jewelry, but one thing I really get excited about are earrings and pendants, neckwear. And so for me, it really just kind of allows me just kind of play around a lot with the designs, and see what it is I can do. And, maybe not using such time intensive techniques, but really just kind of exploring the visual aspects of all these designs and how they can be different, because I think that's always been one thing about our studio, is that we try not to stay in one place. I think you can have a sense of the design style, but to have that style be blatantly shown throughout the entire line of work, at least for myself, it's not, it changes a lot,
I
I
see
would say.
that a lot in your work. I see originality, original voice, different creative things that you're doing. And, a lot of times when I look at your art, I really look at it as almost a modern art. Really, it has that sensibilities to it, which I love. And you're kind of in your own lane to some extent, I think. I don't know of others that are doing that. And maybe that's just the whole way that you have evolved as a person, having this great mentor of your father, but also Georgetown and San Francisco, and seeing different ways that the world works, and not maybe um, being sought. Maybe you don't see yourself as, a native artist, but really as a contemporary artist.
Well, I think that's the thing. It's really about keeping your eyes open, and keeping your eyes and ears open, I guess, and to not take either critique or um, what someone else is doing in terms of their designs. You have to always be accepting of these things, in
Mhm.
terms of allowing it to help you evolve your work. Because in terms of critique, like I said, my dad and I work in the same studio, and so it's not so much critique, but it's conversation. It's being
Right.
able to talk about these things and say, like, wow, okay, well, that looks great, but what if you did this, and how about you did that? And then in terms of keeping your eyes open, having a family that loves jewelry and loves art, is also a great thing, because in different times we were constantly at art shows over the summer, or we're constantly places looking at art, and all of these things, doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be jewelry. It can be sculpture, it can be
Sure.
painting, all of these things in some way can add. And of course, with social media, I mean, just kind of just scrolling through some things, and looking at other people's work, and I mean, it can be as elaborate as it can, but you can just distill it down to one particular thing, wow, that's if you could do something like that, that
Mhm.
would change your entire style, and so you really just have to be open to a lot of these things, and just kind of always have your eyes open, because if you just focus too much on what's right in front of you and not kind of look outward, then that's kind of where things, I think that's where the creative blocks start coming in, because then you just, well, what else can I do with this thing that I've been doing for so long, and I think that's always the scary part of being an artist, is feeling like you're stuck in one place. I think that's been the interesting part of this period in time, because it took a while for me to even want to come back in the studio after the herd. With all the news that was pouring out, with all the changes that were happening, and like the impending cancellation of shows and things like that, it just really, really got me down. And, being able to think about new work, new designs, it was almost, I don't want to get too morbid, but it was like, why?
Right.
You kind of question that. And, it really kind of took, it was actually funny. It was a collector of mine in Japan. He started sending me some ideas for some pendants that he wanted for a client of his. And so I started working on those and playing around with the designs, seeing how they would work. And in doing that, it kind of reinvigorated. And it was like, maybe I wasn't going in every day, but I was coming in every other day and starting on these things. And then just kind of building that momentum again to where, you felt good about just making things again. And there was a hashtag that I used on my Instagram, hashtag still creating despite 2020, because there's a lot of things 2020 can take away from you, including your creative spirit.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, I haven't been writing for my new novel at all, and part of it is just trying to see, how everything plays out with Corona, because it's going to be a part of the theme. You can't just ignore it in a novel. If you try to, I write these murder mysteries that are set in Santa Fe and out on the Navajo Nation, and the Navajo Nation's getting slaughtered with COVID, and so it's really put a damper into my creativity. And I need that Japanese collector call me and say, when's your next bookmark? What are you writing about? to spur you on. I get that. I totally get how it can put a damper. And of course, for you have to produce art. I mean, you have a child, you have a wife, and you have, things that you have to support. And so you have to make art. So it's good that you're back in the studio working. And
well, one of the things that where, I mean, the pendants were one thing, but there was always one thing in the back of my mind that was one of the more difficult parts, and it was a really random part that made it everything that's happened so far. Everyone has their own experience, but for me, one of the more difficult things was my son is in preschool. And we started in preschool this last September. And before he started, my wife and I got to tour the school and everything with him. And, we see the kids in the school, and they're showing us like all the stuff they're doing. They're so excited about it. And there was a little girl there. She was like, they had like a butterfly module they were working on. And she was so excited about showing us the module. And these are little preschoolers. And she was like, they're in the chrysalis stage. And I was so blown away. I was like, this little girl says, knows what a chrysalis is. And, that, for some reason stuck in my mind. And it was like, at some point, my son's, going to be using the word chrysalis in context. And so that, we go on, and it goes through a school year, and of course we get to March, and schools start closing and everything, and he was right before that point where they were going to start that module, because we started doing online learning, and the teachers are saying we got our butterfly or caterpillars, and I was like, oh, and of all things that hit me. And so, I started thinking about the word, and both how much it meant to me that he learn it. Excuse me. And also where we are and who we're becoming in this time period, and how we're sheltering in place. And we don't know where we're going to come out of this, how we're going to come out of this. We just hope we come out of it. And so I had a lot of ideas down the road in terms of the types of pieces that I wanted to do to reflect that. But the series that came out were actually, now that I'm working on, are there was a pendant for every month that we've been in quarantine. So those are my Chrysalis pendants. So I have, that's one thing I've been working on. And there was a larger, more like kind of grander scale piece that I had in mind, but you know, that's something for maybe down the road, you know, to have at some point make, but not right now.
Yeah, I think we're all Chrysalis right now, quite honestly. You know, we're all in that cocoon kind of a, when are we going to come out of it, and what are we going to be on the other end? And unlike a caterpillar where you know the time frame of when you'll actually, you know, evolve and into the mature form, we don't know, right?
Right.
We're struggling. We're all struggling. I think artists struggle more than others in some ways, because I think artists are more sensitive to their environment and to you know, their emotions. And so we, and I say we because I'll put myself as an artist. I really don't usually, but I will. From the writer standpoint, we internalize this stuff, and it can affect our creativity. And when you see things like what your son's missing, it really even affects it more. So I think the fact that you're making these Chrysalis jewelry, that means you're on the process of evolving yourself, I think, and definitely on the right road. So
yeah, you know, and I think, you know, again, for myself with, you know, we have this virtual market and everything. You know, as I was explaining before, how much market has meant to me over the years in terms of not just, you know, sales or anything, but just the meaning of the time. And, you know, because like I said, we were always there. We were always kind of around as, you know, me and my sisters. And we would maybe not be there the entire day, but at some point we would get up there, and like it was just always this like exciting atmosphere of being there. And so we but you know, it's just having those memories of like, you know, it's watching my dad with his clients, and like, you know, like the different things that you would do throughout the day. Like, I'm a creature of habit, so for us, like, you know, just going to get the French bakery quiches in the morning for breakfast, and you know, the big thing in the evening, like we would always have a big family dinner after the first day, and it was just that like that big like sigh, like, you know, we can all just go and, you know, thankfully, you know, relax. You know, again, we're very fortunate and, you know, thankful for, you know, how things have gone over the years. But I think the thing that we're going to miss is just that that aspect of being together.
It's
you
Christmas.
know,
We're taking Christmas away is really what we're doing, you know?
yeah.
You imagine we said Christmas is canceled. I'm sorry, you can't get together. You can't do anything. You can't have any of the, you know, the rights that go with it. And I think that's, people don't realize this about Indian market. I haven't missed one in 30 years. So I'm feeling it myself. Not the same way, but it's there for sure. And I don't think we've taken Indian market for granted, maybe as a group. And I don't think that'll happen anymore. I think people realize how important it is.
Not at all. Not at all. You know, like I said, I mean, The Herd was one show which I thought was completely normal in terms of like crowds and everything. You know, people we were seeing, but you know, to a lot of people, they were saying it was already different for them. Like the crowds weren't there, things like that. And so, you know, I think it's you know, much like everything else, it's just going to take time for everything to, you know, get back to whatever will be the normal, I guess. Indian market, you know, eventually we'll be back in the plaza again.
Right.
But until then, you know, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. I'm a big fan of your work. I'm a fan of your father's work, and I think what you're doing is amazing. People can find you at, is it chavezstudio.com?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, chavezstudio.com. You can also find him on Instagram, Facebook. I assume Facebook too, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Everything's
also,
/ Chavez Studio.
yeah, and the videos that you've made are really wonderful. I encourage people to go watch these. I watched all of them actually, just to see the process, and I learned a lot from it. It helps me because I sell your jewelry too, when I'm lucky enough to get it, and maybe I'll get more now, a little more opportunity. But as far as just trying to get your jewelry is tough. I mean, you're in demand. You're an excellent artist. You're, I think, the next generation of what we're going to see in creativity from, again, you're a native artist, but I look at you as not only a native artist, but you're really an artist that transcends terms and pigeonholes, in my opinion. And,
No, thank you. Thank you.
And you can find it on Swaya too. You have pieces that are in the virtual Swaya show, which is on swaya.org, which I hope people go to. That's up through the entire month of August as well. And you can go to the website and see these artists too. Do you have any final words you want to say to anybody?
Well, again, with Market being, with my progress in terms of the studio, being in the studio the way it is, I wasn't ready for the virtual market in terms of being like day one Indian market time. Right. It's still a collection I'm building. It's still work that I'm working on, and it's not all going to be one release type of thing. I'm going to put out pieces here and there, but I'm actually thinking about not having everything available until maybe right before market. Try to and I know it may not be smart, but it's just one of those things. I'd rather have the big reveal right before everything happens, just because we can hold on to a little bit of that magic that usually happens this time of year. So
well, you have one image of a necklace that looks like it's in gold with some deep blue stones, and I couldn't tell what the stones were, if they were like a Bisbee or whatever.
Oh, those were actually those were past projects. Those were the only videos that I was able to. I'm working on one right now for the Chrysalis pieces. Yes. But those pieces were from the White Oak Gallery, because since they were such monumental pieces, I wanted to do the documentary of kind of what went into making them. And so those ones were from a couple of years ago. Yeah. But the new video will be forthcoming. I've been taking video footage and everything of what's happening here, so that'll be out in maybe the next week or so.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on. Give your dad my best.
I will.
And I look forward to getting to see you again sometime, hopefully in the Indian market next year. But if nothing else, we'll be talking on the internet online. And I encourage everybody listening and all the people that really want to see what really great jewelry is, just like what I have on my wrist. Go see Jared Chavez's studio, talk to Jared, reach out, or go to one of his galleries. He's got some great galleries that show his work as well. So thanks for coming on, and we'll talk soon.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's been great talking to you.
Yep. All right. Keep creating.
All right. I will. Take care.
We need your support for the Medicine Man Gallery channel, so make sure to click the subscribe button and tap the little bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, which we do every morning on Wednesday and Friday. See you soon.